Hey everyone, I'm Jessica, again with Pencil First Games, plus the solo community in general. And I am here on Ed's channel again. Thanks again to Ed for having me here to talk about my top 10 medium weight solo games. So medium weight for me, what does that mean? I have a kind of a fluid definition of what this is, but these are games that are going to take probably more than half an hour, possibly a couple hours to play, that are more about strategy and a lot of elements coming together, lots of mechanics and lots to think about for an awesome solo challenge. So these are what I consider to be some of my top games right now. My top games change all the time, and putting together this list, as with a lot of top 10s, is always fun and difficult because I have the top 10 and then probably like 50 games that would be in spot 11. So we are going to dive right in here and take a look at why I like these games, why I recommend them, and just take a look at the solo gaming space. So let's go. With number 10, we're going to start off, and we're going to see how I do because medium weight games usually come with larger boxes. I'm going to start with Newton. And Newton here is a very interesting game with a huge amount of variability. It's almost a game that's difficult to explain what's going on because there's a lot to do. You're kind of traveling around and seeing the sights. You're also collecting items for a bookshelf. There's a lot of stuff going on. And this one's it is difficult to explain exactly what Newton is about, but I love the challenge of it. It's almost to the point where every single time you set up the game, it's going to offer something different, completely different because of the way that everything is laid out. You're going to find out that certain paths definitely make a lot more sense. Other times, diversifying, maybe that makes more sense. And using these action cards that you're going to be stacking to get better bonuses over time. So you're kind of specializing in certain elements and possibly diversifying a little bit, but it really depends on what that setup is. So Newton is a huge challenge. Requires a lot of focus, but it is so fun to just work through that and finally figure out how it works. If you play Newton for the first time, if you're just getting into it or just pick it up or are just picking it up again for the first time in a while, because I know that's me, I do recommend keeping setup the same for a few plays because that is not the word I want. Varying setup every single time is actually going to make it difficult to understand what works better in certain situations. But once you figure that out, Newton is awesome. And that one's kind of a lesser known game. I don't see it out there that much, but this one I really enjoy for the challenge of it and optimizing and figuring out what I'm doing. As with many games, gotta figure it out. So number 9 is actually kind of a dual entry. We'll see in 1 second. There's 2 games that are very different, but also kind of similar. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. And I'm going to have Pavlov's House and also Castle Itter. All right, can we do this? Close, okay. So why 2 games, Jessica? So Castle Itter and Pavlov's House, you can see, are they're by DVG, similar elements in, the design and everything, but what is going on here is Castle Itter, where am I? Castle Itter over here is really about managing, and you know what, we'll just take them down. Go over them one by one. Castle Itter, these are kind of war games that are great for kind of getting into that space and understanding it a little bit. But Castle Itter is about a single battle and managing individuals kind of holding out and defending a location. Also a really interesting historic element here. There's a lot to read up on it. And it's a lot of interesting material. I like that part of solo for me is, again, I do like beat your own score, some of the dry Euros that are out there, but I do love having those experiences, and the theme kind of sells a game for me sometimes. Obviously, it has to have great mechanics, but the theme kind of brings me in and gets that immersion going. And Castle Itter is awesome that way, in that you're really struggling to defend, and you have to decide, what are my troops doing? How am I going to get this managed? And then there's all types of random events that might come up and that you have to manage and survive to the end. The strangest battle of World War II. I definitely, if you don't get the game, definitely take a look at what Castle Itter was about because it was very strange, and I learned about it through this game. So Castle Itter, that's one of the ones that I'm saying for number 9. The other one for number 9, which again is going to be similar, is Pavlov's House. And why do I have both of these? If I can get it on the screen. Both of these are here because it kind of, when people play these, and I always say people, I just, when my lovely solo community that I adore plays these, there's usually one that stands out for them. So some people will prefer managing Castle Itter, which is just a single location. Pavlov's House is actually managing sort of a map of the whole area. So you're managing another type of battle, but you're at the individual level, but then you also have kind of a neighborhood level, and then even further out a little bit with logistics and making sure that you can get resources into these different areas. And kind of, again, there's that cool management feature of, it may not be as individual as Castle Itter, as I said before, because you're not controlling all of the individual troops, but you still get a taste of that. And then also a lot of, what's going on in the area? How do I control this? How do I get help to this one troop? Oh no, there's tanks coming down this one road. I really need to make sure that I have that covered. So between Castle Itter and Pavlov's House, I enjoy them both. As you can tell by me putting them both at number 9, it's difficult to choose one over the other because they are such different experiences. So with those, again, they're not the cheapest games, so I understand it's difficult to pick up both. Do some research though and see which one might work better for you, especially if you want to explore kind of the war game genre. This is the starting point for me, at least. I know there's a lot of other great games to get started there, but this really brought together the theme and also sort of that idea of managing everything. If my other favorite game was more of a medium weight, I'd include it here, Codeword Cromwell, which is out of print and more of a narrative experience than anything else. That's another awesome one that's just, I like the theme of defending. And that's what I get out of Pavlov's House and Castle Itter. So coming in at number 8 on this list is going to be Nemo's War. I store my games horizontally. You can hear the pieces just moving. You know what I'll be doing after this. Clean up. But Nemo's War is a really interesting experience where you are Nemo in this fancy submarine, and there's a whole map that you're kind of on of the world, and there are ships that are after you, but it's not really about just escaping, it's about exploring. And the stories that come out of this one may be a little bit on the lighter side. It is about managing what's going on in the seas and exploring for treasure or doing some other different types of activities. But Nemo's War is one of those games that I always enjoy. This one I play solo. There's no one around. I read the story cards out loud to myself. It's just a fun experience. And it's very strategic. Part of the strategy is figuring out how to fill those seas as the tension builds, which this game does amazingly well. Nemo's War, you'll start out and all the oceans are open, they're free, I can do whatever I want, I can travel here and there, there's maybe 2 ships out there that I need to worry about. And by the time the game sort of ends or getting towards the end, you're very limited. You can't move as much. You don't have as many actions. You're kind of stuck in some senses. And you have to decide, do I want to risk this? Because this is a game about risking a lot. For a lot of the tests, you're rolling dice, but you can kind of boost that if you want by taking risks with Nemo, the crew, the ship. So there's this whole management aspect of, I got to make sure the crew survives, A, and B, I got to make sure the ship, or the sub, I should say, sorry, does not sink and is, seaworthy, and that Nemo stays sane, basically. So there's a lot to consider as you're going through this, and the way that it progresses is just amazing. Again, going from that open world concept of, yeah, I can do whatever. I can, I'll dilly-dally over here and collect all this treasure, to, wait a second, the ships are coming for me. And all the random events that entails. So much fun. Number 7. Do I want to risk? Number 7 is Imperial Settlers. Now, I have the absolutely enormous storage box, which I don't know if I want to flip up to show, but so we'll go here. But this should give you a pretty good idea of how much content there is for Imperial Settlers. And this one is all about, for me, engine building. You're building that up. So you pick a faction that you're going to play as. Each one plays completely differently, and figuring out how they, their strengths, their weaknesses, figuring that out is a really fun experience. I have barely mastered one. I think the barbarians, I know how to play as. Everyone else, still learning. I'm still figuring out the cool card combinations that can come out. Because again, I'm just going to, it's Imperial Settlers. We'll move this a little so I can talk. But it's figuring out how these cards work together. Like, what is a combination? Like, how would this card even benefit me? There's sometimes when I start the game, I see a card and I say, okay, I see what that does, but all right, I'm just going to discard it. And then later on, I'll say, oh, wait, hold on. I could have actually used that to make a combo with this card, and then it would have created this cascading effect of all these bonuses. I missed it. So I've had games where I score horribly, and it's embarrassing almost, but who cares? I'm learning as I go. To games where I have a tableau that's almost going off the table because I managed to piece together the strategies and figure out how to use those. And that's just talking about one faction. You have the common cards, which are always going to be seen, but you have the faction cards, which really change up the different strategies. And then the reason I have the storage box is because there is so much content for this, that there's almost an endless amount of possibilities. It is, and this one is actually for that medium weight category. This plays pretty quickly. Probably this is around 30 minutes for me, so it's easy to fit in a play of this. The setup is not that bad. It's mostly just getting that giant box off the shelf for myself. So coming in at number 6 is going to be Fantastic Factories. And it's fantastic. So in this one, you're actually creating not necessarily a factory, but a kind of a combination of different buildings and other elements that sort of combo together that you're managing. There are contractors that you might be able to hire for bonuses, and you're doing this all with dice that are used kind of as workers. So different dice values can potentially get you something different depending on what buildings you have in play. And it's really interesting with the combos. Again, I think I really like combos in games. But this one, it plays pretty quickly. The solo opponent here is just gaining cards, and you're actually, there's an interesting element of determining, are they going to be able to produce goods this turn with the dice that they roll? And it's a simple solo opponent to run, where you're trying to work on your factory, or group of buildings, however we want to call it. The artwork is really different, and really it's simple and it's nice, and just finding those combinations again. Sometimes I focus way too much on one part, and then I have to rely on the dice. I need two of a kind, and I haven't set myself up to do that. So there's ways that you have to kind of control the dice, but also have ways to turn those dice into goods, and other resources. And the resources in here are really simplified. You really just have two different types. So there's not a lot of components to manage. It's a little more, not necessarily abstract, but you don't have to say, all right, there's 10 different resources, I got to think about this, this, and this. It's two. It's energy and metal that you're basically looking for, and building up your tableau. But you have to be careful, because if you end the game too soon, the solo opponent might just be ahead of you in terms of goods produced and points. So there's all different types of considerations here, and I have a great time with this one. Just the base game I'm talking about here, but if you want to add in expansions that just came out, there's cool ways to sabotage the solo opponent, the machine, and just doing that having that possibility is fun for me. And it works really well, I should say. I'm not one who likes take that elements in games that much, but in solo, have at it. There's nobody I don't have to feel bad about that. It's a solo opponent. It's not a real person that I'm attacking or taking advantage of or anything. So moving on to number 5, it's going to be role player. And this one, very, very fun. So there's the base game here. There's also expansions for the base game. And then there's also role player adventures, which arrived weeks ago and I still haven't played. Terrible, I know. But just talking about role player here. Role player is sort of a dice manipulation game where you're creating a character. If you've played RPGs, tabletop RPGs specifically, you kind of know about, rolling up stats for a new character, and kind of that aspect. That's what role player does, but as a board game. And it's really interesting because you have these different goals that you might need to kind of fill in to get more points. So you have a guided direction in some ways, but then you have to make these decisions about, all right, do I need that? Is that the right is that the right dice that I actually need right now? And there's also cards to kind of augment your character, and it plays well. I love it. And if you want to continue on with that, those expansions kind of get into other mechanics and other elements. There's monsters and minions, which is great because that one you sort of have a character you're creating and they're doing something in the world too. But just crafting those characters on their own with the base game, fun, challenging experience. Let's go to the back a little bit to show off a little bit there. But you're going to be choosing what to do here. There's little snippets about the world here and there, and it is plain fun. And also probably the base game is probably a little bit on the lighter side of medium weight for me, which is not a bad thing. It's just more to say, you're not thinking, what do I do every turn, and analysis paralysis. There's a challenge there, but it's a fun one that's pretty easy to get into, I would say. So role player, awesome. I'm running out of room. I am currently surrounded by board game boxes, but what else is new? You see what's behind me. So number 4, is going to be Wizards Academy, which I feel sometimes I try not to include this on lists because this is out of print, extremely difficult to find, but it's such a great game that that I think it deserves some attention here. So just be aware, Wizards Academy, if you're looking for this, it is going to be out of print, difficult to find, probably expensive, but, as long as you're aware. But Wizards Academy is one of my favorite games because it does so many different things. For instance, what you have is you have the academy that starts out with all these different tiles and different rooms. Rooms can have different abilities. They're not all connected, so there's pathways between them. Okay, great, but what else happens, Jessica? Hidden spells. The biggest part of Wizards Academy is that you are playing as amateur wizards. These are not professionals by any means. They're students who are still learning, but now they have to defend the academy from one of the threats that are introduced in the different scenarios. So in order to figure out what the spells are, the spells that are used in every game are randomized, and they are face down to start with. So you actually have to collect these different, what are they, runes? Oh, I should know this. They're not runes, but there's different, basically the same element as that. There's different ones around the board that you can collect, and you actually have to use them to cast spells to figure out what they are. Some of them are awesome, help you out. Other ones are botched spells. And you could, which I just love the idea of thinking about how this is playing out. You could have a character who casts a spell and it scares off all the trolls in the area. They're gone. Great, that's so helpful. Or that same student is testing out a spell and they set the room on fire. It can happen. But going into those threats, there are a ton of different threats. Things like fire and water, and then imps and trolls. There's a lot of different ones that can happen in the world, and they interact with each other. So in order to solve problems, you can actually sort of set threats against each other. So how might that work? Say a room is encased in ice, and you need to get through there, and you can't because it's an ice ball. If you set a room on fire nearby, that's actually going to melt the ice and turn it into water so you can maybe go through there. And it is cool. It is a lot of fun to figure out how to, because again, you're not just trying to solve this, okay, I'm doing this, another character that I'm controlling is doing this, because you can control multiple characters. You're thinking, all right, we're doing this, but hold on a second, that threat over there could actually be useful to us. Or, that threat is going to be a major problem. We need to take care of that before anything else happens. So Wizards Academy for me, this is intense setup. The setup for this, I like laying out the pieces, is probably 30 minutes. It takes several hours to play, but it is just so different from everything else out there. And I still consider it a medium weight game because you're not, yes, you have the analysis paralysis at times. There's a lot of things to consider, but it still plays pretty quickly for what it is and for what's going on and all the different pieces that happen in it. Or we could just say it's a heavier medium weight game. Maybe that makes more sense. So, top 3 time. My number 3 is going to be Renegade. And Renegade is another one that's a little difficult to find right now. So what is Renegade? A lot, if you're in the solo community, it's often mentioned that it's sort of, or described as a sort of a mage knight light, if you will. And I have not played Mage Knight enough to compare it. But Renegade, what is Renegade about? You're on a digital network as an avatar, and there's this whole story behind it, and you are managing kind of these sparks on this network and going against, a super massive computer. And there's different difficulty levels, and there's all different types of countermeasures that it's going to put in place against you. So you're moving on this digital network. You're controlling some of what happens on this digital network with all these different actions that you can do. There's a deck of cards that each character, and you can play this solo only with one character. They each have their own deck of cards. You start with sort of some basic actions. You chain together icons to do certain things. But then over time, there is the hack shack, or sort of the shop of new cards that you can pick up and purchase over time. A new card that's purchased goes directly into your hand and you can use it immediately, which is something you don't always see in every game. A lot of times you purchase a card, it goes to your discard, and then you're going to come back to that eventually and find it eventually. This is, I get to use it now and figure this out. Turns are very quick. You don't have a lot of time, and it kind of gets that tension going of this, you're on a computer network, you got to solve this problem. How are you going to do it in as few moves as possible? And there's always to change the difficulty level up a little bit. And it is challenging, but also very fun, and plays in maybe around 40 minutes. So you get this great experience of trying to solve problems. Going back to Wizards Academy for a second, that was solving problems with like the spells and the threats and figuring out how to do that. That's also why I like Renegade, because you're not just, you can upload a virus, for instance. That's one of the actions. But you can also use mimicry to sort of turn threats or those sparks into something useful. You can ghost your avatar across the network so that you're in a different partition or different server. There's a lot of, I think the tricky part with learning this one is there is a lot of terminology to learn. But if you just, I tried to learn it by saying, a red circle, that's a virus. I have to call it a virus. You can call it a red circle. It's not going to ruin the theme or anything. And that's a whole other topic about how people learn best. But the terminology might look like a lot at first, but you do not need to necessarily focus on the terminology as much. But Renegade is really awesome, really interesting. And the card combinations, not necessarily card combinations, but the new cards you can buy from the Hack Shack to kind of build your deck over time. Because when you purchase a card, you actually pay for it with a card. So you're sort of replacing as you go, and you have to figure out, all right, which of these icons is actually going to be helpful to me? Do I want to focus on movement, or do I want to, upload viruses all over the place? Is that what I need to do? And again, so many considerations. Awesome to play and a lot of fun. Hard to find at the moment, but hopefully that one I believe will hopefully get re-released. Moving on, number 2, and I only have one box here, but my number 2 is Gloom of Kilforth, which also there's Shadows of Kilforth, and I believe Call of Kilforth will be coming out. They're all basically the same game system, just sort of different themes and a few different rules. But what is Gloom of Kilforth? Gloom of Kilforth is my favorite game for creating narratives and stories. There are a ton of cards in this, and what you're doing is you have your hero. This is, again, a single character that you can control in solo, and you are going to be traveling around trying to fight against the gloom, and there are so many things to explore and discover. And weaving a story, I like how I'm dancing here. You kind of weave a story as you go through. So maybe when you're out in the mountains, you defeated a vampire. Ooh, great. Which is also very difficult, by the way. The vampires in this game are hard. Also, I should say this is a little bit of the artwork is a little darker. I usually gravitate towards less violent games, approachable themes always. This one's a bit darker, but beautiful, beautiful artwork. Just be aware that it's a little scary too. But like I said, maybe you defeated a vampire in the mountains, and then you next come across an event that says you found this place over here. Maybe it's, a special hall or a library or something like that. And you'll get flavor text on those cards, but you get to kind of create the story. And you are following along through a saga which has its own chapters. So there's going to be keywords that you're collecting along the way, which can be found in certain locations. All the while, the entire world is falling into gloom. So there's this countdown to when the Ancient is going to show up, and there's this final battle and showdown. But it all kind of comes together in this really exciting way that you get this really deep narrative. That's what always happens with mine. I start out and I'm like, okay, I'm whatever type. I'm a half-elf ranger. Sure, okay. Like I have a character, but there's no real connection there. I just have maybe a name and something else. And I'm just putting this down because there's a lot of cards, a lot of components, a little heavy. So we're still on the Kilforth series. But say I start off with that character, great. I'm not really connected to that character. Maybe I know the saga and I know what they're going to be trying to do. But what happens is you start to see how they develop over time. And you pick up items and you pick up allies and all different types of rumors, which actually the mechanic there is that you'll learn about a rumor, but it doesn't become an asset to you until you visited a location or done something else. So it really does help create a story, because it's like, oh, I've heard of this. I heard about this. But, what is that? What does that mean? So it really encourages storytelling. And yes, it is very dice-based. Successes are basically if you roll a 5 or a 6, which is a plus or a minus. Every game has different mechanics. Everyone's going to like different games. Do I get frustrated with the dice at times? Oh, yeah. But there are ways to mitigate that. Again, it's with building up the resources and those assets, turning a rumor into an asset, and just traveling through the world. Again, I say there's that final showdown battle with the Ancient, but during the course of the game, you're going to come up against some enemies, but you can also stealthily move away from them. So combat is a big part of the game, but it's not all of it. A lot of the discoveries don't have to do with fighting enemies. Yes, you'll get treasure and everything from battling those, but sometimes you'll meet a farmer. And that farmer will give you information because you talked with that farmer. Or you'll find, there's all different types of events too, and just random events pop up. There might be a marriage going on. Like that, there's just things that you might encounter that are sort of mundane and everyday, but it helps to build your character and tell those stories. So Gloom of Kilforth, I love for the storytelling. And it feels epic the way the game works. Again, with that countdown and gloom kind of closing in around you. It's awesome. So that is the Kilforth series, which brings me to my number one game. If you know me, this is of no surprise to you. We're going to bring this on over to my number one game. That's right, it's Obsession. I am obsessed. This game has been my top game for the last 2 years, I think. Absolutely love it. What is it about? So a lot of times it's kind of described as Downton Abbey, the board game. In some ways, yes. And the theme, you kind of have to like the theme of kind of managing a family in Victorian England and having that country estate. But the mechanics are what really make this game what it is for me. I do enjoy the theme. I love kind of narrating to myself with a horrible accent that only I hear, and sort of telling the story of this family, because what is going on in Obsession? You are managing a family, and what that means is there's going to be a country estate that has different tiles that you are putting in there. So what does that mean? There's rooms or areas that are being built up or not recovered, restored. There's my word. That are restored. And this is where you're going to host activities with the help of staff members. So you'll have like a butler, a lady's maid, a valet, a footman. There's all different types, and each of these activities can be hosted by certain staff members. And then they call for different guests. So you're also managing that family's kind of social circle at the same time. You do not want an American heiress showing up. That is always the joke. Those ones, they are negative reputation, but they bring in a lot of money. If you use them well and invite them to the right events, they can be helpful. But American heiresses, oh, the scourge of the county. But as you're playing through Obsession, again, this is another, for me, storytelling type game where I get to see what's happening with the family, because as you go through the rounds, the eligible heir and heiress in the county have a certain type of thing that they're looking for. So there's different categories like estate or sporting or prestige, these different types of categories, and they are looking for something like that. It is hidden though, and the solo opponent just kind of has a table that shows, how much they score each season, because it's played over the course of different seasons, it's not like spring, summer, autumn. It's more like a very nebulous sort of time frame. And there's different types of events that can happen. The builder's market, where you can buy up whatever you want, even though money is usually very scarce. And I get so excited sometimes I can't explain it. But the varying difficulty levels that come in with those solo opponents, I had the hardest time. The Hanovers and the Gladstones, I'm actually going to move this so I can, gesture like talk a little bit here. But the Hanovers and the Gladstones, I could not beat for the longest time. I don't know what it was, but they were on to me. And I still remember that to this day. I remember the challenge of just, I'm 20 points behind here, or I just lost by a point. What? And building up that tableau as you see the different activities take place. You have different rewards that you have to manage and figure out how the staff is going to actually kind of be, how they're used, because they need a break. You can't always just use the same staff over and over. So you kind of have to plan that out, or hire more staff. And is that worth it? I don't know. There's all these considerations with every play. And the number of tiles, or those tableau tiles that come out for your country estate, it's different all the time. And there's a builder's market, which you can buy from. The solo opponent, though, can occasionally just clear that market. So everything that was out there that you were planning on, I was going to get that, they take it. And then you have something new, and you kind of have to pivot and figure out, all right, out of this, what makes sense here, and how do I move ahead in different areas like reputation. I need to be focused on reputation, and I need to be sure that I'm looking for those tiles that are going to get me those points for endgame. So much fun. Sometimes it's hard to explain how much you love a game, but I absolutely love this game. And I'm talking the base game only. There's the Wessex expansion, which adds on a little bit. I've played with that one as well. I have played the base game of Obsession over 50 times, not tired of it yet, and still haven't even touched the upstairs downstairs expansion. There's so much more content there, and I am so excited to explore it, because it plays in probably 30 to 45 minutes for me. So again, it's a fairly quick game, but there's a lot of challenges in figuring out what's going to work best. What am I going to do with my butler? He's just sitting here and I need him to do something. Is there something I can do? Is there a tile I can get out here, or an activity that can help me use someone that's not really being utilized on staff? Or oh no, did I pick up an American heiress? What do I do with this? And it's just, there's flavor text for a lot of the cards. And just each family plays differently as well, which I should mention is it's interesting how it plays out, because you get the family and you get your starting bonus. It might be a little extra money, extra reputation, a dowager countess as another family member. So you have your starting bonus, but as you play, that bonus becomes less and less relevant. Meaning that you're going to adjust your strategy based on what's out there, what types of activities you're hosting, what types of tiles you're purchasing and building up. And it's so cool because, if you start off as the family with a little extra money, that doesn't mean you're going to be building up your fortune over the game and being able to afford everything. You might transition to, I need to focus on reputation because that's where this game is going. There's a lot more to it, but hopefully you can tell how excited I am here about good old Obsession. Absolutely love it. Highly, highly recommend that one, as along with everything here. And as I said, these were my top 10 medium weight solo games. There are a ton out there, and I have so many more in this collection, which is barely visible. But I love exploring different solo games. So I have kind of my core set of top or favorite games, but there's always ones that kind of enter into that. And I like exploring that. And that's what solo gaming is for me, is trying out new strategies and giving new games a whirl. and just having fun. And again, I always say that solo gaming is a lot more social than it may seem, because there's a huge online community for talking about strategies and just boosting everybody and being positive about, I lost the game today, look what happened. And the way people comment in the solo community is just so nice. We build each other up, and we want everybody to like these games. We want everyone to have a great experience. So that's why this list is filled with games that I've had great experiences with. They may not be for everybody, but again, the biggest part here is just have fun with board games, whether it's solo or not. I'm big in, solo is what I enjoy the most, but board games in general, just awesome. So with that, I will end it here and say thank you to everybody who stopped by and watched. Hopefully this was interesting and fun. If you know my preferences, a lot of these probably weren't that surprising, but there they are. So there we go. That's solo games. Get out there, play some games, have fun, and thanks again. Bye.